What's up guys, my name is Your Heroes and welcome back to more Gatesville, and today we're going to be talking about the Steam Summer Sale and which DLC is best to buy right now as it's currently on discount. Now, as you know, the summer sale's on for Gatesville and it ends on the 10th of July, so 2 days from now, but even though the article is 3 days, it was released yesterday. But if you're wondering, that Gatesville has put on all their discounts for their DLCs, and if you're wondering if you're a new player or wanting to know which DLC is best to buy because it's on discount right now, then I'm here today to let you know which one is the best starting DLC, or even if you've bought some DLC, which one is the next one to buy best if you've maybe bought one already, or if you've bought them all, then what's my recommendation for the next steps for the DLC, for which DLC to buy next. So if you'd like to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and we are getting close to 3k, so if we could really reach that, that'd be fantastic. So thank you guys so much for the support, and let's get straight into it. Gates of Hell have recently released 2 other DLCs which I've continuously talked about in last videos, last couple of which was the Jubilee DLC and the Support Pack DLC. If you haven't seen those ones, then go check it out. But as you can see, we have the Talvasota DLC, the Scorched Earth DLC, the Liberation DLC, and of course the Airborne DLC, and they're currently all on 50% discount. So as you see, they're slightly different prices based on how kind of big the campaign is and what the factions have been brought in again. So let's kind of start off with the very first DLC that was brought into the game, which was the Talvasota DLC, which was released on the 8th of June 2022, which was a year after when Gatesville was officially released. So Talvasota is basically, it's an expansion for Call to Arms, and it offers the Finland and the unique northern fighting between 1939 and 1945, including a vast array of weapons and unique game mechanics, the return of classic skirmishes, and also expands the Eastern Front with huge replayable battles with a menacing rampant AI. So I recommend to buy this DLC? Well, first of all, the original price is about £17 now currently it's on for £8.49, 50% off. Now this is one of the more kind of expensive DLCs to buy. It's actually the second most expensive DLC, with the cheapest being the Scorched Earth, which we'll get onto next. But would I recommend buying this DLC for starter players? Probably not, because it has the Finnish DLC and the Finnish factions, or I say, and the reason is because the Finnish faction is probably one of the hardest factions to play, and the reason I say that is because they don't have the exact manpower or just firepower in general like the USA does, like Germany does, like the Soviets have, or the Americans do. So if you really want to get this DLC, then I would base it off, you get it when you have played the game quite a lot, you've maybe bought another DLC, possibly like the Scorched Earth or the Liberation, so you get an idea of how to play other factions. But if you really want a challenge, and if you really think you really want a challenging DLC to play, then get the Finnish, because I would say this is recommended for players that are maybe have already played Gatesville for a good couple months now and know the game mechanics quite well. So in that case, I would get this Talvasota DLC. It is a brilliant campaign though. If you're wanting to kind of be a historical kind of reference, then this has to be, again, one of the kind of best historical kind of campaigns that I've played, in my personal opinion. So, and as you can see, one of the pictures include like a big ass railgun, as you see in one of the pictures. And honestly, the Finnish faction is so unique and so different to other factions, and that's what makes this DLC great. But also because you can get this is when believe the skirmishes started coming out at this time on the 2022. So this is when you've done the campaign missions. The skirmishes were also another option. They were kind of the same as campaigns, but they weren't story based. They were just more kind of like capture about 7 different flags and you're there. So overall, I would believe, in my conclusion for the Talvasota DLC, it's not for beginners. It's probably for players that have learnt the mechanics further along. But if you do want a challenge, then this is the DLC for you, and it is £8.45, which is relatively cheap. Next one is the Scorched Earth DLC. Now this is the cheapest DLC you can buy being at £6.49 or its original price being £12.99, 50% off. And the Scorched Earth expansion redefines the Eastern Front with a stunning arsenal for multiplayer, plus brand new single player content to complete the most brutal theatre of war, from the siege of Sevastopol, which I know I'm pronouncing wrong, to the very last offensive of the World War II in the East. So this kind of covers, as you said, within kind of the description there, it covers the Eastern Front campaign. That is really it. It's more, I think, Eastern Front, so that covers your Finland versus your Soviets kind of campaign in that case. So I feel like it'd be a bit useless to get the Eastern Front, the Scorched Earth DLC, without getting the Talvasotter first, because the Eastern Front was mostly the Soviets versus the Finnish. But then again, you did have Operation Barbarossa, which was the Germans versus the Soviets capturing Moscow, so that was another Eastern Front campaign. But in this case, I think it's purely basing off the fight between the Soviets and the Finnish. Although it does, from pictures here, it does have the Jagdtiger and a big ass kind of German gun. You can see that from the trailer here. It is probably actually more based on the Soviets versus the Germans. Sorry, and so in that case, sorry, I'm wrong. But if you've played this campaign, again, a really, really good campaign, and if you're not wanting to buy a faction, and you purely just want based on just historical campaign story, then this is the DLC for you. And if you want to kind of learn more about the historical background, then again, brilliant DLC. They add new units. They've added a new single player content for players to complete. And of course, you've got the very last offensive, which was the World War II in the East, but you've also got the Siege of Sevastopol, which was very, very popular mission back in World War II. And if anybody knows the major details about it, then let me know. I'm not a pure historian, so I'll say that now. But if anybody is a historian out there, then let me know whether Gatesfell's kind of got the mission story right based on what actually happened back then. But my conclusion on the Scotch House DLC, I would say this is a beginner's DLC. I would say if you want to kind of, again, learn the mechanics of the game and learn kind of how to handle different units such as the Soviets and the Germans, and kind of learn about how to use the smoke system, and generally just an overall just understanding battle tactics, then this is a DLC for you, because it doesn't specifically focus on a faction. It's specifically focused on the campaign, which I think a lot of new players will need to kind of learn when kind of coming into this game. So definitely a recommendation with that. Okay, next, going on to the Liberation DLC. Now, this was released on the 29th of November 2023, so 2 years ago now. Well, it almost felt like it was like only a couple months ago when it was released. It feels that new. The Americans was a huge addition to the game, and of course the invasion of Normandy, which was probably one of the main big factors in this campaign. And of course it added the American faction as well. Now, I would say I've already done a faction review on the American campaign, on the American faction, so go check that out. But I have to say the American tanks are probably one of the weakest in the game out of all the factions. I mean, if you're having Shermans going up against Tiger Panthers, then you're completely useless, because the Germans have, again, Tiger Panthers, King Tigers, Jagdtigers, Nashorns, nasty 8.8 centimeter anti-tank guns. Honestly, the Germans are probably one of the most powerful factions for tanks and units in the game. But besides that, going away from the point, Liberation is a brilliant campaign, brilliant faction to play, and this is for players that have good experience in the game. You've bought the Scorched Earth, you've kind of mastered the Talvasotter, the Finnish faction, and the Liberation is the kind of the cherry on the top of it all. This is probably one of the biggest releases that Gatesfell has ever done for a faction, in my personal opinion. And it's honestly one of the greatest DLCs that they've released. I think the American faction has added a whole new dynamic to the game, and adding a whole new faction to the game, which gives you more options to kind of play around with it. And of course, with that, they also kind of ties in with the smaller DLC, which is the Airborne DLC, which I'll get onto a sec. It is honestly one of the best campaigns that I've played, and the storyline for it is really good. So if you want pure, really good historically accuracy for a campaign, then this is it for you. But if you understand how to manage big factions like the Soviets or the Germans, then you'll be absolutely fine with the Americans, because the Americans do have a massive faction in this game, and you're probably better, if you want to learn how to get better with this faction, then play the conquest campaign, for the Americans, and that means you'll understand kind of the American units through the tech tree and learning what guns they use, how to use different units, tanks, where to use, how to basically flanks with Shermans. Honestly, it's so good to learn that, but honestly one of my favourites. But that might change when the British DLC comes out, considering I am slightly biased. But lastly, going on to the last DLC, which is on discount, which is the Airborne DLC. Now, I did say the Scorched Earth was the cheapest, but I'm basing the Scorched Earth cheapest, being how big of a big DLC. The Airborne was a smaller DLC, you still had to pay for it, whereas kind of the Scorched Earth was one of the bigger DLCs in combination with the Talvasota and the Liberation, so that's why it's the cheapest out of these three. But if you're purely talking on the cheapest to buy, then it is the Airborne. But I would not get the Airborne without getting the Liberation DLC. I don't know why Gatesville kind of didn't combine the Airborne in with the American faction itself, but if you buy the Airborne DLC without the Liberation DLC, it's practically useless, because the Airborne specifically concentrates on airborne units, with the Americans, and as you can see, relive the legendary operations of the 82nd and 101st US Airborne Divisions. The DLC offers a new immersive single-player format, which takes you from the first paratroops in Normandy through Market Garden, the Battle of the Bulge, and the crossing of Elbe River. So I would say that this is the cheapest, but I think you won't be able to get this DLC without having the Liberation DLC, because it is one faction. But the main focus, I would say, about this DLC is that it's all about kind of stealth, because you are behind enemy lines. You have now taken over the Normandy, or the Normandy is still happening. So at this point, you're kind of behind the lines. You're very much doing stealth missions. And if you're terrible at stealth missions like myself, or you try to attempt stealth missions, then you will kind of be very annoyed. But other than that, I think the 82nd and 101st Airborne DLC is a fantastic, I know I say they're all fantastic, but they really are. Honestly, the storyline behind it, and to be fair, I never knew the story behind the 82nd, 101st Airborne. I knew about Market Garden, I knew the mission, the Operation Market Garden and the Battle of the Bulge, but I do know specifically it was like 82nd, 101st. I know there's probably everybody screaming in the comments saying, how could you not know? Even though I love history, I didn't know that much about history. The school didn't teach me that much, or I didn't self-taught myself that much, but playing this DLC has given me so much information about what actually happened, probably during the events of during the Battle of the Bulge and Market Garden, and it just feels so realistic when you do play this battle. But I would say this is for players who are high level skilled, and that's because of how stealthy, and you don't have any really tank support, you don't really have any AT support. This is purely infantry based. So if you feel like you can't handle the infantry without tank or proper support, then I wouldn't recommend this DLC. And plus, you probably won't be able to get it if you don't have the Liberation DLC. But if you do have the Airborne DLC without the Liberation DLC, then let me know in the comments down below, because I wouldn't see why that would make sense. But honestly, I really enjoyed this campaign. One of probably the most aggressive campaigns that I've played, for just absolutely just combat. It's honestly just so fun to play, and it's probably really intense because it's all about stealth. So you have to try and stay hidden behind enemy lines, which is absolutely brilliant. And you have to kind of save your I say comrades, like Soviet. You have to save your fellow officers or your troops. So that means that you have to do basically full stealth, put your guys on hold fire, and people with itchy trigger figure will not handle this mission very well. And that was released on 17th of October last year, which is one of the latest. So there you go, guys. That is kind of the conclusion. So for a player like me, if I was a new player, what would I buy? overall, my conclusion for a new starter player, I would buy the Scorched Earth DLC, purely based on just because you need to try and get used to that battlefield tactics and try and learn how to play the game. And then if you're feeling like you do want a proper challenge, then go for the Talvasota, as it is kind of relatively, it's more expensive than Scorched Earth, but I still think it's worth it, and you will certainly get a good challenge out of that. But then moving on, if you've played the German and the Soviet Germans and the Soviets, and you can understand how to play with big factions, and you love kind of the Normandy D-Day kind of historical battle, then go for Liberation and Airborne. I don't know why they're kind of not one combined, but that'll always confuse me. But yeah, that is my kind of conclusion on everything. Now, these 50% discounts will go away on the 10th of July. That'll be 2 more days left from now as recording. So, and of course, the Jubilee DLC is free for everybody to get. And of course, Support Pack is a non-in-game content, so those two don't matter. But those are kind of the 4 DLCs that really matter. And my conclusion is start off with Scorched Earth, then go to Talvasota, then go to Liberation and Airborne. But if you feel like you want to go for Talvasota first, then that's up to you. But for me, if you're looking at one of the bigger kind of DLCs, then go for the Scorched Earth first, because it is probably, if not my personal opinion, one of the greatest campaigns there is in this game. But there you go, guys. That is it for today. That is kind of my review on what is the best DLC there is in today, 2025. So do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments down below, and what is your favorite DLC and which one you'll be buying in the summer sale. And if you haven't checked out my most recent video, which talks about the Jubilee and the Support Pack DLC, then click left here. But other than that, guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and Ostfront, and I will see you in the next video. See you later, and goodbye.